Okay. We talked last week about why we can believe the Bible. So I'd like to talk to this week about, is there a God? And that's actually the most important question there is in all of life, is there a God? Because if there is no God, then there is no real purpose to life. We're just here to whatever you make of your life. That's all that's important. But if there is a God, then there is a heaven and there is a hell. This life is not all there is. And there's a reality greater than any reality you have ever experienced yet in life. So it's the most important question. Now, in school, we've been studying cells and we've been studying the DNA, right? What is DNA?
It is in the nucleus and it is what gives out messages to the whole cell.
That's right. The DNA gives messages to the cell and tells it what to do. The DNA is a special code that is written in the middle of every one of our cells. A code is a language. Language is something that expresses thought. Well, you can't express thought without thought, right? So there had to have been a supreme being who had thought in order to express it in our very DNA. So the DNA of every living cell, every living organism, expresses the thoughts God had when he created the universe. Do you know about giraffes?
Yes.
They're kind of funny looking animals, huh? Their heads, they are 12 feet tall when they stand as tall as they can. That's like if you stood outside our house, they could lick the top of the peak of the roof. They are very big. They are so tall that they need a super powerful heart in order to pump blood to their brain. But there's a problem with that. When they put their head down to get a drink of water, that super powerful heart is so powerful, it would blow their brains out every time they got a drink. So there are valves in the arteries of the giraffe's neck. When it puts its head down, it shuts off the blood supply so it doesn't blow their brains out. But there's a problem with that. If a lion were to attack and the giraffe lifts its head really fast to run, there's no blood in its brain now, and it'll pass out, which is a really unhealthy thing to do when the lions are attacking. So there are sponges at the back of a giraffe's brain that hold just enough blood to keep it conscious and functioning while those valves open up. If any one of those things was missing, giraffes could not survive, right? They had to all have been there from the very beginning. And there are a lot of other animals that their very design shows us there was an intelligent God that created them from the very beginning. So there has to be a God. There's just no option. Now, there are a lot of people who claim there is a God, but claim they don't follow Jesus. They don't believe Jesus was God. Now, we know that Jesus from Nazareth existed, and he was a preacher, and the Romans executed him at the demand of the Jews. Secular history tells us that. All Jesus would have had to do to avoid being executed was to say he was not God. But he said he was God, that he was God. So there are only two options. He either was God or he wasn't, right? There's no other choice. And did you know that that's the same for me? I'm either God or I'm not. And I'll tell you, I'm not God. That chair, that's either God or it's not. It's not God, right? Your shoe, that's either God or it's not. And it's not. Jesus said he was God, so he either was or he wasn't. Now, if he wasn't God, he either knew he wasn't God, but was lying, or he really thought he was God, but wasn't God. In other words, he was nuts, or he really was God. That's really our only options. A liar of the level Jesus would have had to have been to convince 5,000 people he fed them with 5 loaves of bread could easily have talked his way out of being crucified. And one thing that that type of liar all have in common is a very strong sense of self-preservation. But Jesus didn't even try. When they asked him, are you God? He said, I am. He didn't even try to get out of being crucified. So he obviously thought he was God. Now, the level of lunacy that convinces someone that they are God when they're not is called a complex paranoid schizophrenic. And sadly, we do have people like that in our culture. And so we have studied them and we know a lot about them. For those who are older, Charles Manson is our most famous example of a complex paranoid schizophrenic. And the one thing Gesundheit. The one thing all people with that condition, I'm going to say it again, have in common is that they are violent, extremely violent. Charles Manson murdered a lot of people. So, Jesus said, let's see if this sounds like someone who is extremely violent to you. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword. Love your neighbor like yourself. Do good to those who wrongly treat you. If someone hits you in the cheek, turn the other cheek to them. Does that sound like someone who's really violent? No. Also, we know, the Bible says, we know a tree by the fruit it bears. You know we have an apple tree in our orchard because there's apples on it occasionally. And we have a peach tree because there are peaches. We know we don't have an avocado tree because we never get any avocados. Though the weather here makes it so that that's not a hard and fast. But I'll tell you, we don't have an avocado tree in our yard. And that tells us, you can tell what people are by the fruits of what they do. So, Christianity is the fruit of Jesus' ministry. So, Christianity has been the greatest force for peace and brotherly love all over the world. It is responsible for the elimination of cannibalism. It has stopped countless feuds and wars, and it has stopped human sacrifice. So does that sound like the fruit of someone who was extremely violent? Sherlock Holmes said, once you have eliminated all the possibilities, whatever remains, no matter how implausible, must be the truth. So we know Jesus was not a liar, because he didn't act like a liar. We know he was not a lunatic, because he didn't act like a lunatic, and the fruit of his ministry was not the fruit of a lunatic's ministry. There's only one other option, and that was Jesus was Lord. Your father said in a sermon once, there is a God. You're not him, but Jesus is. Okay? Let's sing our song. I am a C, I am a C-H, I am a C-H-R-I-S-T-I-A-N, and I have C-H-R-I-S-T in my H-E-A-R-T, and I will L-I-V-E live eternally. I am a C, I am a C-H, I am a C-H-R-I-S-T-I-A-N, and I have C-H-R-I-S-T in my H-E-A-R-T, and I will L-I-V-E live eternally.